Today, we're tackling one of the biggest, most provocative questions in the history of politics, and it comes from a man whose name, Machiavelli, basically became a synonym for being cunning and ruthless.
So, in his super famous book, The Prince, you gotta understand, Machiavelli wasn't trying to write a feel-good moral handbook. Nope. This was a gritty, practical guide for rulers on how to grab power and, more importantly, how to hold on to it in a really dangerous world. And that led him to ask this brutally honest question.
And there it is. That's his answer. It was controversial 500 years ago, and it's just as controversial today. But, and this is a huge but, if you just stop there, you're missing the entire point. The real genius and the real danger is buried in the why behind that statement.
So, to really get what he's saying, we have to push past the shock value of that quote and dig into the cold, hard logic he built his entire argument on.
It all kicks off with his view of people, which, let's be honest, is not exactly optimistic. Machiavelli basically believed that human beings are, at their core, self-interested. You know, fickle, ungrateful, and totally ready to chew the second it's good for them.
And this is where his logic really clicks into place. He stacks up love against fear as tools for a ruler. Love, he says, is built on gratitude, which is a bond that people will snap in a heartbeat if it benefits them. It's just unreliable. But fear is different. It's based on the dread of punishment. And that's something a ruler can actually control. It's stable, it's predictable, and for him, that makes it a much stronger foundation for power. This really gets to the heart of his whole philosophy, political pragmatism. For Machiavelli, this wasn't about being evil for the sake of it. The number one job of a ruler is to keep the state secure and stable. And if you have to make some morally questionable choices to get there, well, so be it. The outcome is what matters. But here's the twist. This is where the popular idea of Machiavelli just goes completely off the rails. He makes this super important distinction that changes absolutely everything.
And this is the part almost everyone gets wrong. For Machiavelli, choosing to be feared is a strategic move, but being hated, oh, that's a total disaster. He warns rulers again and again, whatever you do, avoid being hated.
The difference between the two is massive. Fear, in his mind, creates discipline and respect for authority. It's a tool you use to create order. Hatred, on the other hand, is what you get when you're greedy, cruel for no reason, or unjust, like randomly taking people's property. That doesn't create order. It's practically an invitation for a rebellion.
He even lays out a clear set of rules on how to walk this fine line. Don't be arbitrary. His most famous piece of advice is for a prince to keep his hands off his subjects' property and their women, because messing with those things is what creates that deep, burning resentment. Any cruelty should be like a surgeon's knife, used quickly, decisively, and only when you absolutely have to. Now, to really get why he was so obsessed with stability, we have to take a step back and look at the world he was living in, because it was anything but peaceful and stable. You have to remember, Machiavelli wrote The Prince while he was in political exile, watching his home, Italy, get torn to shreds. It wasn't one country. It was this chaotic patchwork of rival city-states, all at war with each other and getting invaded by big powers like France and Spain. So just picture it. This was his reality. An environment of constant backstabbing and shifting alliances. There was no central government, no stability. Just staying in power and keeping your city-state from being conquered was a huge victory. In a world like that, stability wasn't just a nice idea. It was the ultimate prize.
So that was his world. But what about ours? Does this 500-year-old advice on power and politics actually hold up in the 21st century?
Well, the political world we live in today is a completely different animal. Machiavelli was writing for one guy, an absolute ruler, in a chaotic world where personal strength was everything. Most modern countries are built on a foundation of institutions, laws, and this idea that a government's right to rule comes from the trust of its people. And in that kind of modern system, fear is just not a very effective long-term strategy. Sure, it might get you what you want in the short term, but over time it just builds up resentment and resistance. It eats away at the very trust that holds a modern society together. Real, lasting power today is built on legitimacy, not just forcing people to obey. So here's the bottom line.
While his cold-blooded analysis of human nature can still feel shockingly relevant, his actual advice, to choose fear, is a really poor fit for our world. In societies that run on public trust and the rule of law, a strategy based on fear has a very, very short shelf life.
But his work still leaves us with a fascinating question, right? If we took his basic ideas about human nature and power and analyzed them using modern tools like psychology or game theory, what kind of new insights would we come up with? Definitely something to think about.